on the GoToWebinar control panel to allow all attendees to hear you. This system will notify you once you begin your broadcast. The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, hopefully you can see my screen now. All right, so as I was saying, this is for members of the SCP Clearinghouse, which presumably you all are if you got this invitation. And as I was saying, the objective here really is to first talk a bit, just briefly about the Clearinghouse, the current version of the Clearinghouse, and kind of the philosophy behind it and how that came into being and the current functionalities, but all of that just quite briefly, so we can then speak a bit more about the upgrade that it's currently going through, why we're upgrading the platform, what kinds of new functionalities will be available on the new platform, and how you and others can use that to connect and engage with one another. And then we'll finish up talking a bit more in detail about what I had just briefly mentioned, which is the 10YFP, which is the 10-year framework of programs on sustainable consumption and production. Just very briefly right now, it's an international framework that was adopted at the Rio Plus 20 conference to help foster partnerships and accelerate the transition to SCP in both developed and developing countries. Again, we'll get a bit more into that later, but it's going to have a very central role in the clearinghouse because one of the main reasons the Global SCP Clearinghouse was first launched was to be the knowledge management platform for the 10YFP and the various 10YFP programs. So we will go through all of that, and I don't imagine this is the first time that we're doing this webinar in what potentially will be a series during this whole upgrading process, depending on how you and others feel about it. And if you feel that you'd like to do this on a more regular basis, we can certainly do that. So I don't anticipate that my little talk here will go for much longer than 15 minutes, 20 minutes or so. And then I would like very much to hear back from you. We can discuss what we've talked about or any issues that you feel we maybe didn't get into enough, answer any questions that you have. Probably in general, it will be easiest if we deal with the questions at the end of the presentation. But that being said, if there is anything during the presentation you feel like you'd like to ask something right then, like I said, just I'll see the little hand raised and I will get to you right away. So with that being said, let's get into it then. As you can see on the agenda here, I'm going to talk a bit first about the Global SCP Clearinghouse, how it is now, and actually what I did for the first couple of slides is literally just go back and find the slides that were presented at the original launching of the Global SCP Clearinghouse in spring of 2013. To kind of give a picture of where this came from originally, and so we can see, what is still relevant and what maybe has evolved and what has changed and what needs to change in terms of going forward now 3 years later. And I think that gives an interesting perspective to kind of see the origin of the clearinghouse. So it was, as I said, originally launched in 2013, and one of the main purposes was to be the knowledge management platform for this 10YFP, but also just more in general to be a kind of one-stop hub for SCP, because there were and still are many people who are involved in sustainable consumption and production, but sometimes we're not calling it the same thing, or we're not in touch with people across different regions or different sectors. And so the clearinghouse is designed to try and make this vast domain of SCP and break it down into, let's say, more bite-sized pieces for people to be able to manage a little easier. So as you can see on here, I think I've covered a couple of them in terms of being the platform for the 10YFP and promoting SCP. A major function, again, is to kind of collect and be a repository for this information that maybe has not been as harmonized as it could be, and trying to bring that some order into all of that. Another reason that this was established was to not just collect information, but to help those who are providing this information to learn from one another and form partnerships and other collaborations and things like that. And of course, to track what's going on in SCP around the world. The main functionalities, again, this is from back in 2013, that the clearinghouse is designed to have, is to provide information on SCP. There's a worldwide database on SCP initiatives. Can make working groups and look for other cooperation opportunities, whether that be, funding opportunities or other project collaborations. The idea is to have a private space where individuals can kind of create their own little dossiers and flag their favorite material and establish a network of contacts and things like that. There is a resource e-library with publications, etc. A directory of experts. Members can sign up to the clearinghouse and then opt to or apply to be a resource expert person in that registry, which just means providing a bit more information. There's news and events on SCP, as I was saying before. So this is what the clearinghouse was really originally designed to do, and then this kind of summarized what I was saying before, that the general broad purpose, or one of them, of the clearinghouse is looking at all of the different sectors and regions and thousands of stakeholders and organizations kind of spread around the world, and trying to make some sense of that and harmonize that more than was previously the case by bringing that onto one synchronized platform on SCP. And so far, let's call this current version of the clearinghouse 1.0, which was launched in 2013 and is scheduled to be the current platform until the new platform is launched in October of 2016. And if we want to talk about what has worked well in this version of the clearinghouse, given the kind of main objectives that I was mentioning earlier, I think that what it has been able to do very well is act, as I was saying, as kind of catch-all for pulling together and highlighting this information that has previously been scattered all over. And this is, clearly, a job that's not done, and probably, not realistic to think that we're going to have everything on SCP in one platform. That being said, I think it's made strides in the right direction. You can see the numbers here, with the number of members and initiatives and different resources, which are just some of the materials that are available in there. So that's what it's been doing well so far, and we have now this repository of vast amounts of information on the clearinghouse. What we're going to talk about today is what do you then do with that information? What is the utility of that information beyond just being there? How can people take that information? How can they use it? How can they apply it to what they're doing? How can they collaborate with others and bring similar information and scale up similar work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So these are the types of concerns and thoughts that we started getting, especially since the profile of SCP and the 10YFP has been increasing, and as many of you probably know, has increased dramatically since the adoption of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, where there is sustainable consumption and production woven throughout most of it, and has a specific one of the specific Sustainable Development Goals on sustainable consumption and production. So we decided, and again, after consulting with many stakeholders and hearing from many of our stakeholders, that the clearinghouse needed to have a makeover. And so that is what we are in the process of doing right now. And this started in autumn, in November 2015, and is scheduled, like I said, to be launched finally in 2016. So we're really, essentially, I don't want to say starting from zero, because we're going to be migrating all the current content. So content-wise, we've got a lot of information, but in terms of the look and feel and design and adding on tools and functionalities, we're really rebuilding it back up based on many, many consultations and a lot of thinking about how can this platform respond better to the needs of all of our stakeholders and of this kind of global SCP community. So on here, I just tried to break it down kind of into three main areas for improvement that we hope to respond to with this upgrade. The first one, maybe sounds a bit basic, but I think is very important, especially when we're talking about something like the World Wide Web, in terms of how quickly things change and how quickly functionalities become obsolete. That one of the main issues that we have been hearing about the clearinghouse is that it's just not providing the type of user experience that one can expect and find easily on the internet now in 2016. And this has to do with everything from how you filter results on the database of initiatives, to how you look through the e-library of resources, to how you connect with other users, etc. And so, I don't want to take too much time getting into many of the specifics, but just know that in general, this is one area that is going to be addressed in the upgrade, is making this into essentially a much more intuitive, sleek platform for 2016 rather than 2013, because it's remarkable how many things can change in the span of 3 years on the internet. Another huge area that needs to be addressed is what I was alluding to before, that currently the problem is not a lack of information necessarily in the clearinghouse. We are always looking for more, but there is a lot of information there. And the issue is, how do people use this, and how do the users of the clearinghouse connect with one another and have more visibility on what other stakeholders are doing? Because at the end of the day, if the point of a knowledge management platform like this is to foster different collaborations and partnerships and learning and capacity building and things like that, there needs to be ways for stakeholders to be in touch with one another. And this leads a bit into the next point, which is the visibility of the 10YFP. So again, I'll get a bit more into the 10YFP later, but as I mentioned, one of the main purposes of when the clearinghouse was launched was to be the knowledge management platform for the 10YFP. I'm just see that there's a hand here, so I'm just going to stop for one moment. And Piedad, did you have something to say right now?
No,
Okay, it must have been from before.
no, sorry.
No problem.
Sorry.
I do see one more question here. Ahmed is asking a question about discussing SCP events and some things at UNIA2. I'm probably not going to be getting into that specifically on this. No, Ahmed, this will be focusing more on this specific platform, which is a platform where information about those events can be found, etc. But I don't think we'll be speaking directly about SCP events on here. So going back to the slide, so the last main area for improvement here has to do with the visibility of the 10YFP, which again, this is one of the main purposes that this clearinghouse would be the knowledge management platform for the 10YFP and for its programs. One of the issues is that the clearinghouse was launched before any of the programs of the 10YFP were launched. So obviously since then the programs have been launched and the needs have been more clarified and their work plans defined and their objectives and leadership structure defined, etc. The needs have evolved and the clearinghouse hasn't evolved along with those needs as fast as it needs to provide the capacity for the programs to coordinate and for them to connect with stakeholders within their program. And so that is the other major area that we saw for improvement on the clearinghouse. So from that, we have been, as I said, working very closely with a web development company since November and going through function by function, the homepage and the knowledge resource repository and the initiatives and the map and the user profiles, etc., etc., etc. And we've gotten through quite a bit, and we have quite a bit to go so far. And so the upgraded clearinghouse is scheduled for launch in 2016 October, as I mentioned. If anyone would like, we have, for example, some mock-ups of what the new homepage will look like. It wasn't practical to put in its entirety onto a PowerPoint slide, but here are some pieces of that. So the new map and kind of the events and part of the member directory, and then a part on the 10YP program. So to kind of respond to the concerns that were raised on the previous slide, the new clearinghouse will be answering that by, for example, in terms of this, new, more modern platform, things like the map that you see there will have a very advanced filtering system, so you can easily click by, region, involvement in the 10YFP, sector of activity, sustainability, themes like that, on a much more intuitive filtering system that'll be used, throughout the platform. So on there, on the e-resources, etc. Members will also be able to feature very closely the initiatives that they're doing and the projects through featured kind of highlights on the homepage. So there's a whole host of new things like this that are going to help for members to put forward the work that they're doing and stay informed about the work that others are doing a lot more simpler than is currently the case on the clearinghouse. With regards to what I was speaking about in terms of members being able to connect with much more facility with each other, there's going to be several tools put in place that will allow for this to go beyond just a knowledge management platform and allow for this kind of interaction. So whether that be discussion groups around the 10YFP or discussion groups around any other SCP topic that a member wishes to create. There'll be a new section on project facilitation in the clearinghouse, which will allow members to go back and forth to find opportunities to work with one another. There'll be a fully searchable member directory, which is not the case today with all several thousand members of the clearinghouse, which can be searched by regions of expertise or areas of expertise. It can be searched by the member's role in the 10YFP. It can be searched by other roles, more specifically within the programs, whether they're in the leadership of the 10YFP programs, whether they're a national focal point for the 10YFP or a stakeholder focal point for the 10YFP, so that you can really pinpoint who and what it is that you're looking for and connect with those individuals. This bottom one on joining a global community is sorry, I had some visitors in the room with me here. But that's referring more to the 10YFP, as I was saying before, which we're actually going to start talking about in a moment. So in terms of giving the 10YFP a much more central place within the clearinghouse, which has currently been just a bit more difficult technically and aesthetically, so that now all of the programs of the 10YFP will have their own coordination hubs, and we'll get into that in a moment in terms of the different functionalities that will be able to bring. Here, I just wanted to point out a few of the main functionalities that we're going to be adding on in the upgraded version of the clearinghouse. This is by no means not everything, and part of that is because we wouldn't have enough time to talk about it, and part of it is also because as we're still in discussions and the development with the web company, that we have not yet defined 100% of everything that's going to be in the new clearinghouse. And so I'll take this opportunity actually to say that if there are certain functionalities that any of you would very much like to see, please feel free to send them along this way. I mean, I can't make any guarantees, but this could be the type of thing we can talk about with the web development company, because there are certainly elements that have not yet been concretely defined. On here, though, as I briefly mentioned, there's going to be a new section on project facilitation. So this will have things like access to an expert directory, access to a database of funding mechanisms, like I was saying, creating different discussions. This is still a section 2 that we are finalizing. So if there are other elements that you would like to suggest as contributing to a section that would be on project facilitation for stakeholders, please feel free to pass them along. The second one here you see is country profiles. These are going to be national country profiles after we received requests from several of the 10YFP national focal points to have an area on the platform that could be administered by them, and so that's what we're going to do. Again, this is still in the process of being developed, but essentially it's going to be customizable hubs for the national focal point to administer and show as much or as little information as they would like about what's going on at the national level in the countries around the world. Right now there's about 120 some national focal points, and so they will be in charge of their country profiles, which will essentially shine a spotlight on the work being done at the country level. And then again, the 10YFP programs will now have their own, more than a web page with their actual coordination hubs, which will let them coordinate information both privately in terms of planning activities for the program, and also having a public face where they can reach out and connect with different stakeholders in the program and within the clearinghouse in general, and vice versa. So it will be much simpler to be in touch with the 10YFP programs and find out how stakeholders can engage. I'm just going to pause a moment. I see a question here. It's not letting me access the questions for some reason, so I'll come back to that later. And now, just to finish up, I was going to give a bit more background about the 10YFP, which we've kind of been alluding to and mentioning a bit throughout the presentation. So as I said, the 10YFP is a global framework that was adopted at Rio Plus 20 to accelerate the shift to sustainable consumption and production. You can see kind of the major objectives here, which I'm not going to go through, and I can send everyone this presentation as well if you would like. One of the very important elements about sorry, I was just I saw a question pop up again. One of the most important elements of the 10YFP is its programs, and what the 10YFP programs are essentially the implementation arms of the 10YFP, and there are currently 6 that have been launched, as you can see here, in sustainable public procurement, consumer information, sustainable tourism, sustainable lifestyles and education, sustainable food systems, and sustainable buildings and construction. And these are what are doing the implementation of the 10YFP on the ground. They are typically led by governments, universities, large NGOs. Here is a kind of a smattering of the different organizations that are leading the 10YFP. And then just to finish up, here is a slide about engaging with the 10YFP in general. As I mentioned before, it's very high on the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. These are kind of some of the main reasons you see here for engaging. But I think to finish up, I'll go directly to how this is relevant, the 10YFP through the clearinghouse. And again, it comes back down to the programs for the most part. So in the upgraded version of the clearinghouse, it will be a lot more obvious who are the programs in terms of who are leading the programs, who are on the different committees in the programs, who are the national and stakeholder focal points for the programs, and how you can connect with them. There'll be opportunities to create different discussions, threads around all of the different programs and their activities. One other important new element will be a program portfolio for each of the programs. So looking at the different resources and different activities going on in each of the programs, essentially a mapping of what's happening divided by work area, so you can easily search out everything that's happening in that program in terms of implementation and how there might be opportunities to get involved. I think I will stop it there in terms of the presentation and go to the questions, which I see are already coming in. If anyone has any kind of specific questions that relate to maybe particular cases about being involved in the clearinghouse, I'm happy to be in touch generally. And here, I think we can open up the floor to any questions about the clearinghouse, about the upgrade of the clearinghouse, about the 10YFP, etc. I think there are a couple questions here already. Okay. From Mark, he said it would be great if the new site functionality included facility for sharing and collaborative working between 10YFP between 10 YFP program working group members. Is this likely to be a new functionality of the clearinghouse? Yes, absolutely. There'll be. We're still working on the naming. I'm not sure if we're going to call them working groups, but yes, essentially there will be. I'll continue to call them working groups right now, but that can be organized around any number of topics for exchanging documents, for having a calendar of shared events, etc. For discussing different topics going back and forth. So that is going to be, yes, one of the kind of main functionalities of the new clearinghouse. Absolutely. So yeah, that's the presentation that that I had planned here. I wanted to leave the rest of the time for any questions. I see that Ibukun has a question. I'm going to unmute you. Ibukun, you're unmuted if you... Doesn't look like your microphone's working. Looks like you also submitted the question, though, written. So let me see here. Is there a way that the private sector... Ibukun, I'm not sure I understand your question with SCP. Yes, is there any way that the private sector can collaborate with SCP for capacity building? Yes, so one of the main advantages of the upgraded clearinghouse is that there is going to be a lot more opportunity for the public and private sector to work together, most notably through having a lot more visibility on what the 10YFP programs are doing. Secondly, through the much improved kind of worldwide database of initiatives, which will make it a lot easier to kind of filter through what is coming in from the private sector, what is coming in from the public sector, and opportunities to engage with those projects. Again, it'll be very simple to create different public-private or private-private working groups in the new clearinghouse. So absolutely. I see someone asking, will you send us the PowerPoint? Certainly, I can send the PowerPoint. I see a question here from Randall. In the new site, will there be a social media type of functionality between members, and can members interact between the different programs as well? So there are social media accounts. Actually, here's a slide. There are social media accounts for the clearinghouse and for the 10YFP. A few of the programs, as you can see here, the tourism and the sustainable public procurement, have also made social media accounts. So, I mean, this is more up to the individual 10YFP programs if they would like to do social media. I mean, we are active on the Global SCP Clearinghouse social media, and in terms of promoting content that you might submit to the platform through social media, there's absolutely no problem with that. Can members interact between the different programs as well? Certainly, it'll be very simple to navigate between the different program hubs, and the programs in general have cross-cutting activities. So the programs are not designed to be kind of in silos, but designed more to be working towards the common objective. I mean, the clearinghouse has the 10YFP, has common objectives that apply to all the programs. So there's definitely opportunities for collaboration there. I did also just want to add, as you can see on this slide, that in the meantime, while we're waiting for the new clearinghouse to be upgraded, there's no need to stop submitting material. All of the material from the current platform will be upgraded, or will be migrated to the new platform. So you are encouraged to submit material. And again, if you'd like for any of that to then be promoted through our social media, there is quite a good following on that, and we're pretty active there. So please don't hesitate to ask, and that will not be a problem. I have a question here from Kai. Just about the recording. Yes, and so this webinar is being recorded, and we'll put it on the YouTube channel of the Clearinghouse. So I will send an email after this with the Clearinghouse, with the PowerPoint presentation, and with the link to where you can see the recording of this webinar. No problem. Jose, will it be designed for smartphones and tablets? I will double check on that, because originally this was certainly part of the specifications, and at some point I believe that we had to compromise, at least for part of the website, though I'm not sure the entire platform. in terms of the responsive website for smartphones and tablets. But I'll double check on that, Jose. And that comes actually to a good point in terms of, when we started this and had kind of our wish list of, the 100 things that we wanted to change. And, when we got down to the TORs and really discussed it, the budget, etc. I mean, there's certain areas that we had to compromise on, at least in this initial phase of the development. For example, the platform right now is going to be in English, and that's not to say that material can't be submitted in another language. It just means that at the top of the website there won't be a button to switch the entire site into English, over to Spanish, into French, etc. And so these are just some of the decisions that had to be made for practical reasons. And so, Jose, I will check on what exactly was decided in terms of the responsiveness for smartphones and tablets, because off the top of my head, I cannot remember. If anyone has questions you want to ask out loud instead of typing, you can feel free to raise your hand, and there's no problem. Looks like there may be a couple more questions here. Ahmad, I see your questions. I would encourage you just to send me an email. You have my contact information right there, just because it's a little more specific than what we're getting into here. Are there any more questions on anything that we have gone over here? If not, we can stop there. Like I said, in the meantime, please feel free to continue uploading material onto the Clearinghouse as we go forward and define more of the tools and functionalities and kind of the layout of the different pages of the platform. I'm happy to be in touch and kind of show those as they come along. I'm available for any other questions or for any more information that anyone has. But if there's nothing else right now, then I will say thank you to everyone for joining, and please don't hesitate to be in touch. And I look forward to the new Clearinghouse and sharing it with all of you.